I'm Councillor Brinhorn and I'm chairing the meeting today. I just want to first remind you of some of the domestic arrangements, please. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. I'm put off by Lavinia's eating, obviously, aren't I? That you do not interrupt other speakers. That if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt, you may be asked to leave. And can you please ensure that all your mobile phones are on silent or switched off? I'd like to remind everybody present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of being repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Now just have a roll call of the officers. I think we've got John Snell here, Melissa Evans, Jan Robinson is not, and I think Emily you're covering for her, and as well as Emily, there's Sue Palmer, and that completes all the officers. Is that correct? I've got a picture of Henriette in front of me. I'm not sure if you're there or not, Henriette.
Good afternoon, Councillor Hearn. I'm just sort of monitoring and dipping in and out of the meeting to see if anybody needs help. So I'm here, but I'm not having any part in the meeting.
Ah, that's lovely, Henriette. I thought maybe that's what you're doing. Welcome aboard and good afternoon. I'll move to the agenda now, and we'll start off with apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Mike Norris and also from James Caston and Lavinia Haddingham, your deputising, I believe. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests by members? Are there any to declare? No. Item 3, that's the minutes of the previous meeting from about 2 weeks ago. They're due out next week, so they're not ready today, but I've already spoken to Mandy and they will be sent round hopefully early next week. Item 4, petitions. Do we have any petitions, Mandy?
No petitions.
Any questions by the public?
No questions.
And questions by councillors?
No, none received.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to agenda item number 7, please. That's on page 5 of your papers. And I think, John, you're going to present this and run us through it before we go to questions and debate. So over to you, John, and very welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. The report that you have in front of you details the Council's significant risks as of July 2020 and the work undertaken around risk management processes since April 2019. And normally this is an annual report and you might have expected to see the risks as of the 31st of March, but bearing in mind that we're into August, it seemed very sensible to actually provide an update as of July rather than something that was historical. In terms of our approach, both councils are clear that the responsibility for managing risk belongs to everyone, and therefore there needs to be an appropriate level of understanding of the nature of risk. This approach is actually supported by the approved risk management strategy. As part of good governance, the councils manage and maintain a register of its significant risks, which you'll find are linked to its priorities and regularly reviewed by the senior leadership team and regularly reported to both cabinets and annually, as I said, to this committee. To provide some clarity to those members new to risk management, I thought it would be helpful just to provide an overview in the process, and hopefully you'll find this useful. So the SLT hold quarterly workshops, or have certainly been holding quarterly workshops prior certainly to COVID-19, where the significant risk register is reviewed in terms of each risk scoring and mitigation. Potential and emerging new risks are also discussed. Each risk on the risk register is owned by a member of SLT, and following each workshop session, they will liaise with their representative cabinet lead member to ensure they're up to date with the risk position. From the report, or the appendice, you'll see that there are currently 18 risks on the register, of which risks 11 and 15 have been separated to reflect the different levels of scoring between the two councils. In summary, 10 risks have been scored as medium, 5 have been scored as high, and 5 have been scored as very high. On the register itself, you'll see that each risk tells a story across the page, starting from the initial inherent scoring, that's before any mitigation is applied, through to the current position and ending with a target score and outstanding actions to help achieve this score. Now, I'll probably appreciate those who have actually spent some time looking at the register that some of the planned completion dates will need to be revised. That's not to say that they haven't been completed, because I know some of those actions have been completed, but they will remain on the register in terms of how we monitor and manage those risks. But clearly, some of those completion dates need to be just updated, and I'll go back to the relevant risk owners to have that in place for you. During the review of the register, a number of risks were de-escalated to an operational level, where they'll be monitored at a corporate manager level. This will be an ongoing exercise and should reduce the number of risks on the significant risk register to a more manageable number. These registers continue to be updated and discussed between the corporate managers and their assistant directors. They will also discuss any potential risks that may need to be escalated to the significant risk register. The report also details those risks deemed to be top risks facing the councils at this point in time. These risks may not be the highest risk scored on the register, but are those who can be considered a high priority by members of the senior leadership team. In terms of the other work that we do as a team, the Audit and Risk Management Services staff continue to work with report authors, offering guidance and assistance when capturing and reporting and recording the appropriate risks and scores to both committees and cabinet reports. Once reviewed, these reports are signed off before submission to ensure that the correct use of wording of risk and the scorings are correctly applied. Although not mentioned in this report, there is a move to integrate performance, risk and finance reports together to be presented to Cabinet on a quarterly basis, and I'm working with my counterparts to ensure how we actually do that and correlate those those three disciplines together. I'm happy to take any questions at this stage on the report, councillors.
Okay, thank you very much, John. I'll move to questions in a moment on a alphabetical order, probably. Just a question from me, John, to sort of settle in my own mind. There's different sorts of risks, isn't there? There's financial risks, there's risks of not performing, risks of not doing what you say, and embarrassing risks. I just wondered how you rate these different criteria against each other.
The approach that we've adopted, Councillor, is more of a holistic approach. So you're quite right, there are financial and non-financial risks, and these are assessed on their own merits and they're aggregated together. So we would then come up with a risk scoring in terms of the likelihood and impact. But you're quite right, each of those elements in terms of management concerns as well, also things that are going to be happening tomorrow that we're aware of, and also that horizon scanning as well. So each of those elements would be taken into account when we establish that there is a risk that's deemed to be of significant importance to put on that register, and then we would actually take those different elements, score them and come up with a collective score in terms of the likelihood and impact.
Okay, yes, that very much helps explain it. Okay, I'll go to questions now, and then at the end, when I've been through everybody, I'll open it up for any extra questions or any debate. First on the list is Oliver Amerson. I'm not too sure if you're here. You're here, are you, Oliver?
I don't believe Councillor Amerson is in the meeting.
No, I haven't seen him come up on my screen. Lavinia, you're next in James Caston's place. Any points or questions to ask?
Just a quick one. It might be a bit of a, nonsense one. The risks, John, that are at sort of point 12 and above, are they off sort of COVID related because of, who knows about the future? The ones, like I said, the ones that are very high, is that to do with, frankly, the crisis we're in right now, or what?
Certainly those top 5 risks that I sort of mentioned, 2 of those, 17 and 18, are COVID related. So we had the initial lockdown through COVID in March, and then potentially risk 18 is looking at a potential second spike or a second wave, and how we're going to be geared up to address that should that actually happen. It's not quite as a big risk as you might think, because we've already got things in place in terms of looking at our critical services, making sure that staff are redeployed, so we have sufficient resources to maintain those critical services. But nevertheless, it is obviously something that's high on our agenda and we need to be very mindful of.
But I was just thinking, with things like the Gateway 14 thing, that must be affected, filling that and everything. That's going to have a knock-on effect, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly COVID-19 across all our services, there's going to be an element of impact, and that's dependent on terms of the service that's providing. And obviously, it's down to those corporate managers and assistant directors then to assess what changes in processes, resources they actually need. But yes, you're quite right that COVID-19 sadly has an impact right across the board in terms of our service delivery.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lavinia. I'm not too sure if Melanie has joined the meeting. I think possibly not. Maybe from now on, Mandy, if either Oliver or Melanie turn up, you could just let me know. Otherwise, we're going to have to assume they're not here, I think.
Yes, I will do.
Councillor Robert Lindsay, question from you, please. If you have one, that is.
Sure, yeah. Well, I don't know, it's a question or a comment, but there's no, the next item is looking at our Treasury Management, and I see we have investments in, via Schroders, 4 million quid there. I presume that's in kind of stock market assets. And we've also got investments in the pension fund that's managed by Suffolk County Council Pension Committee. But both of those areas expose us to the risk of fossil fuel assets becoming stranded. We've seen BP just cut its dividend. Oil companies are now operating in an oversupplied market with demand for oil having collapsed. I just wonder if that should be on our risk register, given both the investments in the Treasury Management and through the pension fund.
Okay, John, that's a bit of a googly for you. Are we investing in the wrong things? I think is where this question is coming from.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in those financial institutions, but I would imagine, unless somebody's going to correct me, and feel free to chip in, Melissa, but I would imagine they have their own strict regulations or processes and procedures to try and remain climate friendly as possible, because I don't think it would do their interests particularly good should they not be. But it's a bit of a difficult one, because I don't know what they have in place in terms of moving forward and trying to obviously become sort of carbon neutral, as we are trying to do. But I don't know, as I said, I can't really comment in terms of what their policies and procedures are within those financial institutions, but I would imagine there is something around climate change and how to address that. I'm not sure that probably answers your question.
Could I just come back, Chair?
Yeah, please do.
With Schroders, they're obviously, what's to stop us just asking them what their policy is, and if they haven't got one, can they please get one? I presume we're paying them to manage our money, so they ought to be able to. I have asked the question before, and I was given the answer that how much of we've got 4 million across Babergh and Mid Suffolk with Schroders. So 2 million each, and apparently 9%, I seem to recall, of that is in fossil fuel companies. You know, the way to mitigate the risk would be to get Schroders to give us a fund that doesn't invest in fossil fuel stocks.
John, before you answer, Melissa is jumping up and down. Would you like to come in, Melissa, and join this part of the debate?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can certainly say that Schroder all the companies that we invest in, they are very proactive in the environmental and social governance arena. We are a very small part of that investment fund, so our voice is very small, but I certainly take on board your comments. And we have got a meeting with Ireland Close later in the week, actually. And that's one of the things that's top of my agenda to discuss with them is, you know, what can we do to get some assurances around, you know, the fossil fuels and what are all the alternative investments as well. So that's one that's top on my agenda to talk to them on Thursday. So,
thank you.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Now I've got John Matheson next, but I've also got Dave wishing to join in on this particular topic. Dave, do you wish to come in?
Yeah, I've actually got sort of no questions at the time because John actually did answer the question that I was going to ask regarding the completion dates on the risk register, but we did discuss that at our pre-meeting yesterday, and I'm happy to hear that they will be updated, a new report issued with those dates on, so I'm happy with that. Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. John, it's your turn to speak now.
Yes, thank you. And before I ask my question, I appreciate if Mandy could give me a ring off camera, so to speak, after I've asked this, because I keep losing the papers for the meeting, which is very inconvenient. But yeah, the question really was and John has sent me a link now, but the operational risks that have been de-escalated or never actually become the primary significance, they used to be relatively easily available through Connect with that sort of honeycomb tile business, and I know there was one or two problems where I asked questions and the chief executive got a bit cross because departments hadn't been keeping things up to date. But now that seems to have disappeared altogether, and so I wanted to ask that we make the operational risk registers relatively easily available to members should they wish to look at them. So that's my question at the moment, if we could improve on that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Hopefully you found the link was okay and you managed to get into those tabs at the bottom of the registers, which would have then provided you with a list of those operational risks at service level delivery. So we can sort of tidy that up as well. One thing I did want to add, just to perhaps reassure Councillor Matheson, is that when obviously risks from a significant register are de-escalated, they should find their way on the operational risk registers unless there's a very good reason why the risk has been totally terminated and we can control it. But in terms of the process, what's being introduced is, as part of the assistant directors one-to-one with their corporate managers, there will be a standing agenda item on operational risks. So those operational risks will be addressed, and obviously the corporate manager will be accountable for those risks, and if they're not updated, then obviously we'll have to provide an explanation why they haven't been. I know in the past that Councillor Matheson and I have had long discussions about particularly the operational risk registers, and the onus is very much obviously on the corporate managers to keep them updated, but also now that the assistant directors will have that as a standing agenda item to raise that very question and about the risks and whether those risks are still pertinent, whether they need to be escalated up or actually just taken off the register, but obviously with full explanations to provide that audit trail.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. But I think really part of my question and my issue is, can we actually get? It seems to have been a deterioration of information being available to members. The concept of sort of drilling down through layers of information and contacts and so forth for departments, that seems to have got appreciably worse than it was, say a year or 2 years ago. Is there some prospect of getting it to a better place?
Well, certainly, Councillor, I will try. Certainly, I mean, not really that much has changed from last year, Councillor, because I know that we've had long conversations, and certainly I've hopefully have tidied that up, but they remain on Connect. They haven't been moved from Connect, so they've always been on Connect. So hopefully, access to those from not just members but officers as well, other officers, it should be fairly easy. But I mean, certainly I'll have a look at that for you and see whether there's any ways that we can perhaps improve that availability for you.
Well, maybe what I actually need is help from Mandy to find out why I'm not actually seeing the Connect screen, but we can take that later on. If Mandy could give me a ring or something, I'd be much appreciating. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Matheson. Henriette will actually give you a call.
Oh, right. Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. I'm sure that can be put right. Councillor Alistair McGraw. I'm tending to use official sort of titles to start with and then dropping into Christian names, as it's probably easier for me. But Alistair, you have a question?
Yes, Bryn, just a couple of things. Looking through Appendix A, which lists the full tables of the various risks facing both councils, I'm just noting the various risks that we have. The greatest of these seems to be, and they're not unrelated to each other, COVID-19 and financial outcomes for the future of both councils. Those two stick out, but obviously they are, well, they're not immediately under our control until we've got through this crisis. What I wanted to ask John, though, was what would you say, how would you characterise the overall trend in risk management in the course of the last, say, year, because this report more or less covers that year? How would you characterise the approach?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question, Councillor. In terms of where we are now, perhaps as opposed to perhaps a year or even more ago, I think it's fair to say that in terms of risk management, it's deemed to be a bit of an administrative burden for many of us, not just this council, but for many councils up and down the land. But I think certainly as we've heightened awareness in terms of how we provide our services in the best, most efficient and effective way, I think we've become far more aware of the boundaries that we work in and the constraints that we work in. And therefore, I think in terms of how we've moved forward risk management, I think there's a greater understanding from top to bottom. So in terms of taking risk so seriously, what we've done in the past, we do it subconsciously, but we haven't been particularly good at actually articulating it down on paper. So we think risk all the time. If you think about how we've got here, what we're going to be the problems, the IT issues. So instinctively, we're always thinking about risk, but we haven't always been good at actually, as I say, recording it. I think we're in a far better place now, and I think that's down to certainly from senior management who take risk extremely seriously, and that's descended right down to even junior members of staff. We've also had experts, and I have to profess that though risk management falls under my umbrella, I wouldn't say that I'm a risk management expert. I apply it in the trade of being an internal auditor. So I have a fairly, hopefully, good understanding of risks and likelihood and impacts. But to supplement that, in the past, what we've had actually a professional that's come in and given several presentations to SLT just to get us really started and thinking more corporately in how we're going to manage these risks, but not just now, but as I said, about horizon scanning, what's coming round the corner that we need to be aware of. So I think in terms of our approach, it's far more proactive than it has been in the past, which is extremely good. And in testament to councillors like Councillor Matheson, who I'd like to say politely has been on my case for many years, but in a very positive way in terms of how we've pushed and moved risk management to the forefront. So I think when we look at the way we've developed our risk register, if you go back again a year, it wasn't really telling a story. from start to finish. I think the current register, when you look at it from the right to the left, it actually provides that level of detail and understanding. And as I say, the final column is around about, what further action do we need to be, and what is our target? Now, so what we're aiming for is how can we mitigate further those risks and reduce. So there's a greater understanding of where we need to be, and that it's not just a significant risk register, but also that disseminates down to the operational risks, and also the amount of work that not just myself but the audit team has undertaken to support not just members, because we provided presentations to members, but also to our staff as well. So I think we're in a much better position in terms of understanding. We've still got improvements to make, we're not perfect, but I think in terms of where we are supported by the risk management strategy, when we're looking at our risk appetite, I think we're in a much healthier position in terms of understanding and reacting in a very positive way.
Can I just follow up on that, Councillor?
Please do, Alistair, far away.
I recall some discussions held some years ago on a scrutiny approach to risk management and assessing risk, and it does seem that there's a great deal more systematic approach, which I think is what we asked for at the time from a scrutiny point of view, and it does appear that that's actually bearing fruit now. That's just a comment, but thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Councillor Mary McLaren.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you have a question, please?
I do. I have a question for John. I was interested in risk 13, which is about health and safety of staff and what the risks were. And considering that working has changed dramatically for the majority of council staff, are you considering a risk that might be associated with working at home or working in isolation from teams? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. That's a really good question. It doesn't just apply to officers, members as well. So I know that Arthur is acutely aware, as is HR, of the health and well-being of our staff, because really with any organisation, that's the main asset of any organisation, is the health and well-being. And without that, then an organisation is likely to fail. So that's taken extremely importantly in terms of health and well-being. There's lots of support networks as well, both within the organisation and externally if we're feeling pressured. It's down to senior management and corporate managers in particular to make sure that the health and well-being of each other. So, for example, not wishing to embarrass Melissa, Melissa's part of a little group that we have, that we just touch base once a week to make sure that we are okay, and basically sound off our frustrations, to want of a better thing. But generally, I think it's down to management to make sure that our staff are well, particularly on our one-to-ones. So there should be monthly one-to-ones that go on with our staff. That gives us an indication. There are flaws in this, and I'm the first to admit that. Talking as we are now doesn't necessarily give you the right picture. I'm a bit of a traditionalist. I like to see the whites of people's eyes. But we don't have that luxury at the moment. But it is important to touch base with our members of staff regularly. We also have ELT, the Extended Leadership Team, and often that is on the agenda in terms of the health and well-being of staff. So we're acutely aware of that, and we can't afford for, obviously, staff to feel particularly unwell in these very difficult times. I mean, interestingly, in terms of sickness records, we have very, very low sickness records, which in some ways is a little bit surprising. But I think, in fairness to the testament and the resilience of staff, they've been coping extremely well. And hopefully with the relationship that they have with members of staff and colleagues, that would be flagged up if people were struggling. So we are conscious of looking after one another. So I think it's a valid point, and I think that we are in the right position to try and capture any sort of concerns that we may have.
So can I just ask, will we see it on the risk register then, John, at a later date?
In terms of a unique risk? A separate
risk.
That's something that I can have discussions with Catherine Steele, who's responsible for, obviously, like payroll, health, and personnel. So that's something I can speak to Suzanne as well, the corporate manager there. So we can have those discussions whether we feel we can manage it at an operational level or whether there needs to be an escalation onto the significant risk register. I think if we found that we were creaking badly in terms of people going off sick and having health problems, then I think you're absolutely right that it should be. At the moment, the indications are that it's being well managed, and therefore we would expect to see it managed at an operational level. But certainly I can have those discussions.
Thank you, John.
Yes, thank you, John. I think Mary's almost asking for a sort of a health audit just to check that nobody's dropping off the radar, and that might be good. Just before I bring in Emily, I think I can say as a councillor, I did really appreciate a call earlier on from Claire asking if I was alive, well and sane, and I was able to reassure on at least two of those things. So, and I hope that other councillors had the same call and being checked on. Emily, you've got your hand up. You wish to comment on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to build on the information that John has provided in his response. There is a significant risk that's on the register that relates to overall sort of health and well-being of the staff. So that's a kind of catch-all. Specifically with regard to COVID-19 health and safety and well-being, we've undertaken a number of health and safety questionnaires with staff members about working from home and making sure that they've got adequate arrangements at home so that they've got a safe working environment. We're also undertaking health and safety risk assessments for staff members who are coming back into the office for various essential activities. So if they're needing to go to Endeavour House to conduct a meeting, for example, as we've got staff members doing this afternoon, then they do have a risk assessment around that. And then alongside that, we also have some specific wellbeing activities relating to COVID-19. So we've run some workshops for staff about sort of personal resilience and managing workloads, managing stress, managing multiple conflicting priorities with sort of managing your home life and childcare and other things that this period has thrown at us. So just really to provide reassurance to the committee that there is a whole suite of activities that have been going on to support staff throughout the pandemic and the changes to the ways of working. And I think that probably demonstrates why it doesn't need to be escalated onto the significant risk register as a standalone, because we're doing so many of those mitigating actions at the moment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Emily. That's very, very helpful. I can see, John, you've got John Matheson, your hand raised. Can I just leave you, bring in Dave Muller, and I'll make you first on the roundup at the end. And Councillor Dave Muller, do you have comment or question, please? I think you haven't got your microphone open, Dave, but I did lip read you and you said, I'm sure you said no comment. John Matheson, would you like, you've got your hand up for a supplementary?
Yeah. Well, I had, are we on questions or are we discussing the risks now a little more?
You're first off, so you can carry on with that theme.
Okay. Well, the taking particularly John's points about COVID and so on, that a number of the dates and even some of the risks will need reassessing very urgently. I did wonder whether we should actually put the risk register back on our agenda in a lot less than 12 months' time, actually. But on the specific risks, there was this discussion we had with Tom Barker in the opposition briefing last week. The joint local plan, it seems clear that there's a very specific risk which has been created by the government publishing a white paper on the planning system, and the risk is that if we don't get the joint local plan, I think it's called Regulation 19 version, into the government's hands for an inspector before the some kind of guillotine's going to come down, we would then have to start again, basically under a different set of rules. So there's a very specific risk there, which is I think, rather than the general point about further action is to continue to develop the joint local plan. It's very specific now. I think we have to get it in ahead of that government timetable. Not that we know what the timetable is, but there's the risk. You understand the risk, John?
Yes, I think. Yeah, thank you for that, John. And before I go to the other John, I think it's something we're all aware of. We have set out a timetable. Are you asking that it be speeded up and we do it before? I think that's the nub of your question. Is that correct, John?
Well, I think it's just there is a very clear and specific risk which needs to be identified, which is is very fundamental. Because we know how much trouble we get into if we haven't got an up-to-date local plan, and we know what happens if the system changes halfway, or some of us do anyway, that were around in about 2009 or something, when we had to start rewriting, and I think that's what led to the what's it called, the focused review of the core strategy focused review, heaven help us. Was because they changed the system when we were halfway through doing our local plan, the previous one. So that I just wanted to recognise that absolutely. Apart from that, I mean, there's several like 4, 5, and 6 where the mitigation is not going to be possible because of COVID, and John's accepted that they're going to have to change, unfortunately. I'll have a look through my notes. I've got 1 or 2 others, but perhaps someone else would like to have a go.
Okay, John. I'm not too. I think what John Matheson's asking for is almost a policy change. John Snell, are you able to answer John's fears?
And correct me if I'm wrong, I might be looking almost at Emily to reassure, but I think weren't assurances given when that paper was presented to Cabinet members in terms of the time frame? I thought there was general concern in terms of whether we were going to meet deadlines, but I thought assurances were given on the day when that paper was presented.
Well, I wasn't at the Cabinet, but obviously similar assurances were given at the opposition briefing. But what I'm saying is that the assurances are good, but they need writing down under the further action comment of risk 1.
Yes, thank you, John. As I see it as a councillor, it was debated at full council and a very firm timetable has been agreed. Emily, can you confirm that?
Yeah, so Chair, just to confirm, obviously the news of the planning white paper has been very recent. So I think probably the best course of action is for us to take those comments from Councillor Matheson away and speak to the AD for sustainable communities and establish whether that significant risk needs updating in light of that new white paper, particularly in respect of the timetable for the local plan. I think that's probably the best solution, rather than John or I trying to advise you on the local plan.
I wasn't looking for that at all. Just the recognition of the risk. I think that's what we're here for, really.
Okay, John. Well, point well made and point taken. Alistair, you wish to? We're in the general free for all now. So if anyone's got any comments on things that are actually on this agenda item, please just shout. I can see you all, but Alistair, far away.
It was just to follow up on John's John Matheson's comments on the planning system. The white paper, I recall, makes specific reference to joint local or local plans that are at stage 19 and gives a specific time frame. So it's just a matter of marrying up the time frame in the white paper and the time frame that we already have in plan. I just throw that in because I think that's my recollection of what I've read.
Yeah, and sticking to it.
Oh, yes, I take your point, John.
Yes, we would all hope that. Are there any further questions on this agenda item from the committee? You've still got your hand up, John. No, you've gone now. Any further questions?
Up again.
I think if I can just say, John Snell, I think going back to my first question of how you judge risk, I read through the paper very well, and I was just interested to know how highly you scored the risks. I think like 3.94, not meeting the carbon targets is a massive political risk and something we need to do, or even earlier. And was further down the paper, I picked up that you regard us as being at risk of not appointing another sort of PR person, when I think we have 6 already. Now, I might regard that as not even a risk, something that perhaps we didn't ought to be doing anyway in this financial station and situation. And there's so many things like that. So that was the reason I just wanted an overall picture, John, of how you scored risk. And if something like the second thing I mentioned was avoidable, is there a chance of taking it back to policy and changing our mind on that one? Because we do need to save money as well, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. I mean, obviously, it's a very crucial risk, hence why it's obviously found its way onto the significant risk register. And I know that the AD responsible is taking that very seriously. So, and it's something that's sort of cascading down. And if I can provide any assurances that, interestingly, I've got that in the internal audit plan for this year. So I've agreed with Cassandra Clements, the AD, that we will do an overview of where we are at some point during the year as well. So just sort of perhaps give members that assurance how sort of serious we take this particular risk. This is a risk that's on there, but it's obviously a risk of how we actually mitigate it to prevent us falling into not becoming carbon neutral by 2030. So that will be a watching brief. And as I said, this register is regularly updated from SLT's point of view. So if there's any developments, obviously that will find its way in terms of the mitigations and actions that are taking place. And as I said, at some point during this financial year, we'll be undertaking an independent audit on where we are as a position statement.
Thank you, John. Henriette, just bringing you in, you're looking to speak?
No, I'm afraid not. Have I got a hand raised? I hope not. Sorry.
There's a big yellow hand right across your picture, but Robert, you're looking to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two questions. One, just on that carbon risk one. The original motion was also about an ambition, or it was used quite fuzzy language, but for carbon emissions across the whole of Suffolk, so across the community, the wider community, not just the council. So I don't, that we seem to have just, from the wording of it, of the risk, it seems to be just focused on the council's own emissions, but I don't know whether it's, perhaps John can explain why we haven't looked at the wider community there. And the other question was risk 15. What's that all about? Is that to do with merger? It says new way of delivering services or something. I'm not clear what we're talking about there, but it says it's all been put on hold by COVID anyway. But and for some reason, Babergh are more at risk from that than Mid Suffolk. So just a bit of an explanation of risk 15, please.
Yeah,
yes.
I might pass it over to my learned colleague, Emily Ewell, who's the risk owner in terms of risk 15. Coming back to your earlier point, Councillor, obviously in terms of our ambition and looking at the wider community, perhaps I can then take that point up with perhaps the Assistant Director, if you wish.
Yes, please. Thank you. Yeah.
Emily, I think you're going to comment on this.
Yes, Chair. In terms of risk 15, it is related to potential structures of the council and the potential benefits that those kind of structures might have in terms of the financial stability of the council. So you'll see that the risk is around the financial security of the councils, or the risk, and then the cause is looking at different delivery models, and obviously part of that is increasing working together and the potential savings that could arise from those joint working operations.
Thank you, Emily. John, you've got your hand up. John Matheson, do you have a last question?
Thank you. Yeah, it's at risk 8 and 9 really. Our asset investments. I have to say that I mean, I know the register does, you know, is. I know John actually did say, I was struck by that. He did just say that it's regularly updated, and I wonder a little bit on Gateway 14, risk 9. It seemed to me that the further action that's listed of, I think, effectively finding a partner to who with the ability to move the project forward, that had been done, but that really the mitigation of risk now ought to be talking more about marketing the development or potential development. So that one kind of looked out of date really, from my understanding of where we're up to with it, because we did put through was it council in February an agreement as to who the development partner was. That might have been a confidential item, but I don't think discussing the fact that we discussed it it breaches anything really. But also on SIFCO risk 8, the likelihood that we meet the income projections over the next 6 months or 12 is now vanishingly small, unfortunately, and so I think that risk ought to reflect that, because it's a problem that isn't just COVID related, it's actually structurally embedded and has been made worse by COVID. So I think those two particularly worry me as to you know how we're describing the risk at the moment, and what the mitigation needs to be. I mean, the mitigation is always rather subjective. Well, we're going to do this and it will reduce the likelihood of X happening, is inevitably, I say, it is subjective, and so I think we have to look hard at those, and particularly that's why I'm looking to make them, you know, more specific, like what I said about on risk number 1, to be as specific as possible makes it easier to see that we're achieving it, and therefore it's justifiable to reduce the likelihood of the whatever risk it is occurring, because there are a lot of quite red items on here, and yeah. Okay, so I think that's the other. I think those are the other comments that I really wanted to make on the yeah. Thank you.
Okay, John. Thank you. John Snell, can you reassure us on any of those, please?
Yeah, certainly those two risks that Councillor Matheson has just raised. I can go back to Emily Atack, the Assistant Director responsible for that area, and have a word with her in terms of looking at the risk descriptions, if you like, and perhaps using that as a way forward to update those risks and the mitigations that are in place, particularly with the current climate, as you said, that we are facing.
Okay, thank you, John. Dave, you've got a hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to congratulate John on this excellent report, and I would actually would like to move the recommendation in paragraph 2.1 that the contents of this report, supported by appendices A and B, be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, Dave. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, Bryn.
Thank you. That's Lavinia. Thank you very much, Lavinia. Just before I go to the vote, I see we have Councillor John Whitehead in the meeting. You're obviously suffering, John, from the lack of football going on. Is there anything that you wish to comment on what you've heard so far?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just really joined the meeting as an observer, but I would say that I think risk 9 is quite well out of date because as you say, the development partner's been approved. I think a new hybrid planning application needs to go in, which obviously is a risk factor. So I think that does need quite extensive updating. I was also a bit surprised that on risk 12, reputational damage, etc., it seems to be assigned to the assets and investment cabinet member, which sort of, I'm not quite sure why that would be. So my main observations, and my other observation is that I know Councillor Matheson was saying that the income projection for SIFCO against plan, is under threat because we haven't invested our full amount yet. So obviously that does need progressing.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you for your input. John Snell, could you just reassure Councillor Whitehead?
Yeah, it goes back to obviously the previous comment, so yes, I can speak to the relevant ADs. Coming back to risk 12, obviously the risk owner is the chief executive in terms of reputation, as opposed to, but I understand, yes, cabinet members for assets and investments. I'm not quite sure whether that, in terms of the lead, whether that's the right lead, but I suppose it has to sit somewhere. But I expect that was what they thought was most appropriate at the time.
Okay, thank you, John. I think we should move to the vote now. This has been proposed by Councillor Dave Muller and seconded by Councillor Lavinia Haddingham. I think Mandy is going to do a roll call now of approval for noting. So over to you, Mandy.
Yes, Chair, thank you. So, councillors, if you could reply for, against or abstain. Councillor Horan?
I'm for.
Councillor Haddingham?
For.
Councillor Lindsay?
For.
Councillor McCraw?
Having issues.
Is that for, against or abstain, Councillor McCraw?
I'm for, but I cannot get through to you.
Right, thank you. Loud and clear, thank you.
Oh, you got that?
Yes, we can hear you, Alistair.
Sure. My apologies.
Councillor McLaren?
For.
Councillor Matheson?
For.
Councillor Muller?
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, Mandy, and thank you, councillors. We'll now move to item 8 on the agenda, the Treasury Management Outturn for 1920. And that will be you, Melissa, to introduce, I would think.
It's actually going to be Sue this afternoon, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yep, Sue. I'm sorry, Sue. I'm stealing your thunder. Come on in, please.
Thank you, Chair.
I've got you on my screen now. Thank you. Loud and clear.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the Treasury Management Report covering the position for the outturn for the financial year 2019-20. It provides details of the performance effects of decisions taken during that period and confirms compliance with the Council's Treasury Management Policy. The report explains in more detail the factors affecting the strategy and activities, including the regulatory framework, the economic conditions, interest rate and liquidity risk. Towards the end of the year, the spread of the coronavirus began to change life as we knew it. COVID-19, which had first appeared in China in December 2019, started spreading across the globe, causing plummeting sentiment and falls in financial markets not seen since the global financial crisis. Interest rates, which had remained steady during the year at 0.75%, were reduced by the Bank of England to 0.25% in March, and then swiftly reduced again to a record low of 0.1%. At that time, the UK government introduced a number of measures to help businesses and households impacted by a series of ever-tightening social restrictions, culminating in pretty much the entire lockdown of the UK. More specifically for our two councils, regarding banking activities, Babergh operated within the daily bank account limits. However, Mid-Suffolk exceeded it on one day by 129,000, This was as a result of a high value payment being received too late in the day to be able to invest it. Each council has increased its short-term debt, Babergh by 9.5 million and Mid Suffolk by 6.4 million. This was to take advantage of lower interest rates following the increase in the Public Works Loan Board rates. Each council lent a further 4.1 million to Sifco. Mid Suffolk lent a further 4.7 million to Gateway 14. All investment activities undertaken were in accordance with the approved counterparty list. The council's investment activities, including average rates of return, can be found at Appendix C of the report. Both councils made another investment of £2 million each in a higher yielding strategic pooled fund, which was with Investec Diversified Income Fund. Investment by both councils in Funding Circle has reduced as unallocated funds have been reclaimed and existing loans repaid. For Babergh, this was 216,000 of the 430,000 previously invested. And for Mid Suffolk, it was 208,000 of the 423,000 invested, leaving the balances at the 31st of March as 214,000 for Babergh and 215,000 for Mid Suffolk. Both councils are compliant with the upper limits for interest rate exposure. The investment activity undertaken for the year was done so in priority order of security and liquidity over yield as prescribed in the Treasury Management strategy. Members should note that in the recommendations, recommendation 3.3 relating to Mid Suffolk, it should read that the Treasury Management activity for 2019-20 was in accordance with the approved Treasury Management strategy and not 2018-19 as it says in the report. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue. Well, this has been my bedtime reading for quite a long while now in the previous one. I don't really think I understand it, and I don't really think I have any questions. We'll assume that Councillors Amerson and Barrett aren't in the meeting. So, Lavinia, I'll start with you. Do you have a question on these papers?
Not at the moment, no. I'm fairly baffled too, but not at the moment.
Now, I'll take you in order. Robert Lindsay.
Well, obviously, I made a comment about can I perhaps ask? I'm aware that Schroders is invested in sort of stock market shares. What are the other funds? Are they? Because some of them seem to be property, some seem to be. What is the actual assets that they're investing in? These different providers.
Are you able to answer that, Sue?
Yes, the CCLA is a property fund, so that's in various types of property. The others, the UBS and Schroders and Investec, they're generally in equities and shares and cash and various sort of types. So they are diversified within the fund to obviously spread the risk within each of the funds. And obviously, as the council invests in these different funds themselves, we as the council are trying to diversify our own investments as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, just really to reiterate the point, I was just looking up how many councils had declared a climate emergency, and it's now 67% of the 400 or so district, unitary and county councils across England and Wales. 67% of them have declared a climate emergency. So, we're entitled to all of those 67% of councils ought to be asking, and I assume most of them have the same providers, the same three names, more or less, Schroders, UBS, Investec. What are you doing about the risk of climate of stranded assets, because you know, so I imagine the 9% applies to all the total of money that we have in UBS, Schroders and Investec. 9% is in fossil fuel stocks.
I think, Robert, you're saying as we've declared a climate emergency, we should only invest in green companies. Is that the nub of your question?
I think yes.
Yes.
Not that we should. Well, we should. I don't know about we should only. It depends how you define a green company, but I don't think we should. I think it's incumbent on us to examine where we're putting our money, and if we're putting it in companies like Shell and BP, we're actually actively promoting the extraction of fossil fuels, which is totally against what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, I thought that's where we're leading. Melissa, can you help us on this, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously, when we took out most of these investments, we hadn't announced the climate change. And certainly the other thing we need to bear in mind as well is the money we have invested, we don't want to lose with the market conditions as they are at the moment. Obviously, they're not at the level as when we invested them. So I think we'd be foolish to sell those assets now because we'd lose an awful lot of money. But it certainly is, as I said, high on my agenda. But I just need to safeguard the council's money to make sure that we don't lose an awful lot of money by a quick reaction to try and get us to that place. That reassures you.
Thanks, Melissa. I presume some of these things are fixed term investment. Is that correct?
We do have that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
No, we can't.
Melissa, can you unmute?
My mute button.
Yeah, you're fine.
It's on, off.
Yeah, no, we can hear you loud and clear. Far away, please.
No, we do have the ability to sell them as and when, but as I say, we do just need to keep an eye on those values. So, yeah.
I think if Councillor Lindsay and Matheson have anything to do with it, we will be keeping an eye on all of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. John Matheson, you're due to speak next. Come on, far away.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. What I was just looking at the page 31. The debt, the Mid Suffolk debt increase to Public Works Loan Board.
6.4. That one.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's paragraph 4.6. I'm in a lot of trouble with the papers, but as you know, but
no, you're in the right place, John. Go on.
Yeah. What is looking at those two items, the debts, Sifco Gateway 14. The understanding of the Sifco investment, when we buy a property, 90% of it is a loan from the councils to Sifco, but 10% of it is an equity investment. And what I was wondering is whereabouts in the Treasury paper here does it show that other 10%? How does that work?
Sue, I think that's one for you.
Yes, actually within the Appendix C on page 46 of the report, in paragraphs 2.5 to 2.11, it sort of refers to first of all the equity 2.5. Paragraph 2.5, it refers to the equity within the holding company, and then it mentions in the next paragraph the proportion or of the new growth companies, and then in 2.7 it mentions the equity value of the investment in Sifco.
Yeah, so that's the cash. That's the additional cash going in when we buy another property.
That's right. That's the sort of the 10% equity proportion of the whole.
That's what I was looking for. Yeah,
yes.
I can't get the papers to work really. What appendix did you say it was?
It's Appendix C, and it's sort of paragraph
2.5 to 2.7. I got that bit.
Yes.
Yep. Appendix C.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'll look at that later.
Okay, well, if you come back, you've probably got about 5 minutes, John. Alistair McGraw, any comment to make on this? Any questions? Alistair, are you there? Are you hearing us?
I'm having the same difficulty. Councillor Hurren, as everybody else. There's a slight delay in response. No, nothing at the moment.
We can hear you loud and clear. Mary McLaren?
No comments, Chair.
Dave Mueller?
No comments, thank you, Chair.
You're all happy with everything?
Go that far.
Okay, there's no other hands raised. I just wondered, Sue, on page 46, just where we were, any comments on the Babergh Centre and how that's going? I know it's not completely full, but and they're fairly up-to-date figures, but anything you could reassure us with on that area?
I think I'll defer to Melissa on this occasion.
I can see Melissa waving. Come in, Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. My mute button is off.
Yeah,
we will be bringing the Q1 performance, general fund performance report through to Cabinet next month. Later this month even. So we will be updating the Babergh position as a part of that report as well. So that will be featured in there.
Yes, I was aware of that, so that does need keeping an eye on. Thank you, Melissa, for coming back on that one. Any other? Okay, it's free for all now. Any other debates or comments to make on this paper, please? Yeah, Dave.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to actually move the recommendations in 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And I'm quite happy to second the same, having gone through it pretty thoroughly. John Snell, you're looking to speak? No, you've got a hand up? No,
not me.
No. Alistair, yeah, some of the pictures on my screen are, one is superimposed on the other, a little bit difficult to tell. But Alistair, you've got, you're waving at me to speak.
Yeah, it's just I think it's the muggy weather. It's delaying all our response times. I mean, I'm in a mixture of sunshine with showers. No, it's just generally speaking, I think the report at least shows that we've followed our Treasury management structures. We're within the boundaries that we've set ourselves. And yes, there are a lot of issues about investment and Treasury management. The great thing, of course, is that the money is being actively managed on a day-to-day basis, and it's going to be a flexible process. This isn't something that's going to change overnight. On the queries and questions over investment in equities in particular and the relationship those equities have with fossil fuels, I believe it's quite likely the market itself is going to change anyway, and that many of the investing funds will be looking for opportunities for diversifying their portfolios in very much the direction that Robert and John have suggested. I suspect that's the way the world is going. In fact, when you've got a major company like BP talking about not only cutting their dividend, but also cutting their own exploration and extraction by 50%, and spending a lot more time. I appreciate it's not everything, but it's definitely a large step in the right direction. And I believe the financial markets are likely to follow that. And by definition, anybody investing in those financial markets through whatever medium is going to have more options to move exactly as was hoped.
Yes,
so I fully support this report.
Yes, Alistair, I fully agree. I think it will be self-regulating in a way, in this side of the world anyway. In the eastern side, who knows? Money rules, and we will be driven by what's financially best to do. Emily, you are definitely waving at me. You wish to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just a procedural point. You've got a split recommendation here, so there's different recommendations for each council. So you actually need a Babergh member to propose and another member to second 3.1 and 3.2, and then for Babergh councillors to vote on those two recommendations. And then Mid-Suffolk members for 3.1 and 3.3, please, Chair.
So, Dave, if you'd like to find a seconder for the Mid-Suffolk part.
Bryn, I'm happy to second that.
And that was Lavinia. That's lovely. Thank you, Lavinia.
And I'm happy to second or propose for Councillor Hurren.
That will be fine. So we've got that sorted out pretty quick. Mandy, would you like to do the roll?
Sorry, Emily, can you just confirm if I have to do 2 different votes?
I think so.
You vote on 3.1 and 3. Sorry, was the delay there? Can you hear me now, councillors?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
So Babergh members will only be able to vote on 3.1 and 3.2, and Mid Suffolk members only on 3.1 and 3.3. So 2 separate votes, please, Mandy.
Okay, thank you. So we'll do the votes on 3.1 and 3.3. So that will be for Mid Suffolk members only. So Councillor Haddingham.
4.
Councillor Matheson.
4.
And Councillor Muller.
4.
Okay, that's unanimous. And on 3.1 and 3.2 for Babergh, Councillor Hurren.
Yes, 4.
Councillor Lindsay.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor McLaren.
4.
That's unanimous as well.
Thank you very much, Mandy, and thank you, councillors. I'm now moving on to item 9 on the agenda, consultation on the new Model Code of Conduct. Very interesting paper, and Emily, you're to present, I believe. It's all yours, Emily.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? I've lost my
No, you're fine.
buttons on my screen, so I'm...
No, it's fine. We can hear you, and we can lip read pretty well as well, so far away.
Perfect. So I'm pleased to present the report JAC 1925, which seeks the committee's agreement to a response to the Local Government Association's consultation on a new model code of conduct for elected members. The background to the consultation is contained within the report. However, I would like to bring 2 points in particular to councillors' attention. Firstly, the LGA's proposals to amend the model code are limited to changes that can be implemented within the existing legislation, which is why not all of the Committee on Standards in Public Life's recommendations have been included. There is no intention at this time to seek legislative change. Secondly, once a new model code is published by the LGA, the councils will have the option whether to adopt it as its own local code of conduct, and that will be a full council decision. So any change to our code of conduct will have to go through the full council process. The councils could choose not to change the existing local code, or could produce a new local code which incorporates some of the key recommendations. However, the intention is to continue to have a Suffolk-wide local code of conduct, which would be adopted by the county, districts and borough and town and parish councils across Suffolk, which has many benefits, not least that as monitoring officer, I'm also responsible for town and parish council conduct issues, and it makes it much easier if we're all using the same code of conduct. So I'd now ask Chair for any comments or amendments from the committee on any of the draft consultation responses contained at Appendix C of the report.
Thank you, Emily. Just to clear my own mind, Emily, on 3.2, I presume that all the councils have to vote to agree to do this for us to do it Suffolk-wide. Is that correct?
So in terms of the consultation responses, each council is responding individually, but when it comes to a point of looking at a new code, we would work together across the board with the towns and parishes also to try and achieve everybody adopting the same local code. So that would be the process. So consultation responses are individual, albeit the monitoring officers from the districts and the county have all been in conversation, but actually looking at a new code would be a county-wide approach.
Okay, thanks, Emily. And just on 3.4, could you explain, Emily, please, the last bullet point? It says the criminal offences relating to disclosable pecuniary interest should be abolished. I don't quite understand that.
Yeah, so this was a recommendation by the Committee on Standards in Public Life. At the moment, if a councillor fails to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest and participates in a decision, then that's potentially a criminal offence, which is liable to fines and potentially a prison sentence. So the committee are basically looking to remove the criminal nature of that element.
So who would this person be answerable to if it's not a criminal offence? Who then will deal with it?
So it would fall to the monitoring officer to deal with as a code of conduct issue.
Okay, I think you've been cut off in mid-thread, Emily.
Yeah, I lost you all. I had green screen for a moment then. Yeah, so they're looking to remove the criminal element, and it would just fall to the monitoring officer to deal with it as with any other code of conduct issue. So, under the regime, fairly limited sanctions.
Well, I wish you luck with that. I do rather tend to think it's a bit of a step backwards, but I'll leave it to the floor to see how other people think. Thank you, Emily, very much. Let me think. Same order again. Any comments, Lavinia?
No, I think it's it all looks great, and so no, I've got no further comments to make. Thank you.
And the personal gifts have gone up from 25 to 50. That's something else that is up for debate. Robert Lindsay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with the comments about the bringing the council into disrepute clause. I think that could cover anything, and is too broad and is it's not specific enough. I don't think it needs to be there, given all the other things are enough, are sufficient. And to bring something in like that, something I say John Ward might view as bringing the council into disrepute, I might view it as telling the public what's going on, and vice versa. So it becomes a political argument. But we all know what civil behaviour and good conduct is. We all have a different view about what brings a council into disrepute.
Okay.
So I prefer to see that dropped entirely.
Okay, Robert. I'll come back to Emily maybe in a moment. John Matheson, any overall comments on the paper?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of having actually been subjected to the processes, I somewhat agree with Robert that a long and time-wasting and expensive process of seeking to demonstrate that I was bringing the council into disrepute ended without succeeding in proving that. And so I've got some pretty mixed feelings about that one as well. I think that what is very interesting is the decriminalisation, though. The point about that, you see, is that and Emily will confirm this, that if something falls within the criminal sphere, then the monitoring officer will not investigate it, and so you might feel that it was a retrograde step decriminalising it, but on the other hand, the odds of getting the police to investigate something are not great, and prohibiting the monitoring officer from investigating them is unfortunate. So I think that is probably on balance better to be decriminalised, although I would imagine that the criminal law, ultimately, if you've done something bad enough in terms of advantaging your nearest and dearest or whatever, then it probably, even if it was, it was a code of conduct issue, it would become a criminal offence as well, perhaps, and Emily might comment on that.
Can I just raise a point of order, Chair?
Alistair, yes.
And it is, I think it's because I would like Emily to be able to answer this question. As I understand it from her preamble, the Committee on Standards in Public Life and their recommendations is not what we are discussing. We are discussing the response that Emily has provided for the Council, because I have reservations about some of the suggestions of the Committee on Public Life and Standards in Public Life. For example, this rather woolly phrase there, which says that a councillor must not participate in a discussion or vote in a matter to be considered at a meeting if they have any interest, whether registered or not. Well, I'd hope most councillors would have an interest in what they're talking about. And then the sentence afterwards, which qualifies it, is very woolly, it's very subjective. Would reasonably regard, if a member of the public with knowledge of the relevant facts would reasonably regard the interest as so significant it is likely to prejudice your consideration or decision making in relation to that matter. I mean, and that just seems to me to be all over the place, capable of multiple interpretations. But that's not what we're discussing, is it, Emily?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McCraw. Yeah, you're right. As I said in the preamble, the recommendations by the Local Government Association are not looking to implement anything that would require legislative change. So at the moment, the categories of local pecuniary, local non-pecuniary and pecuniary interests are contained within the Localism Act. So that actually can't be, it can't be decriminalised at the moment, even though that is what the committee was recommending. So it's interesting to hear councillors' comments on it. And just returning to Councillor Matheson's point, he is right that when there is an issue around a disclosable pecuniary interest, it is automatically referred to the police, being a criminal matter, and I am not able to investigate it as monitoring officer. And also, Councillor Matheson alluded to the fact that quite often the issue is not pursued by the police, and that quite often is the case, particularly when it's quite a low level matter. Then quite often it's not pursued down the criminal route, and the complainant then is left with really nowhere to go. So it's interesting to hear those comments, and I'm happy to clarify the process. But as you say, Councillor McCraw, that element won't be changing in any revised code because it would require a legislative change.
So can I clarify again, Emily, that actually what we are going to be discussing and voting upon, or possibly amending, is in fact Appendix C, your provided response to the LGA consultation on this draft model member code of conduct.
That's absolutely right. So we're looking at
that is what we should be discussing.
Yeah, we're looking at Appendix A, which is the proposed revised code, and then the responses that I've drafted in Appendix C are for the committee's comments, amendment and ultimately agreement.
So I'd suggest that pages 97 onwards, your response are probably going to be, because the questions, after all, rather explain themselves, and that this is a point of order, because I think otherwise we're going to be talking around the houses, that this is actually what we should be focusing upon.
Yeah, Councillor, that's the bit that you have the ability to influence. The recommendations from the Committee on Standard Public Life I've included because they provide that important background context for where the LGA has got its recommendations from.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Do you have any other comments on any other part of this report?
On the specific contents of Appendix C, I do. But I confess that trying to find them at the moment. Second screen not playing ball with me.
Shall I come back to you in a while?
If you could, I would like to find the sections I had queries about.
Okay, I'll put you on hold, Alistair. Councillor Mary McLaren, do you have any comments on this paper?
No comments, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Muller, any input?
No comments, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Have you caught up a bit, Alistair?
Getting there. I do apologise. There's quite a lot to this consultation, but there were a couple of specific. I do very much applaud the support given to use of social media and the difficulties that those councillors who use social media sometimes face, but also that social media use should be included within the code of conduct. I think guidance is essential for the proper use of social media. Like any other tool, it must be used responsibly. And I think we're all familiar with occasions where well-meaning people, but perhaps a little bit too quick on the keyboard, say some pretty outrageous things which should not be borne and should not be tolerated. I have a series of rules, and I expect polite, informed discussion, but I do not tolerate anybody in my own group, and I run an active Facebook group, and I make this point very clearly, and in other groups that I speak on. If people are basically saying things which are either libelous or slanderous, and people don't appreciate, Facebook is a publishing tool. If you publish something on Facebook as a councillor or as an individual, in effect, you can be libeling somebody. And I think it's an important point that we should have protections for councillors, but we should also make the point very clearly to the public that this is the case. Now, the point I was going to make was there was one response that I wasn't happy with. I'm sorry, Emily. And it wasn't a significant one, but it was, I do agree that council, to bringing the council into disrepute, which Councillor Matheson mentioned. Is it clear? What page is that? 100 and... Oh dear, it's questions. Oh no, it's just gone right back to the start. Hang on a minute. I do apologise, members. But it's quite important that we get this specifically right. Page 101, question 7. 7A. Yes, the definition, acting with civility. No, that's the wrong one. Disrepute is question 8. Sorry, my apologies. Page 102. This could be better described as conduct which undermines public trust and confidence in the local authority. Very happy with that. There is not sufficient reference to the use of social media. Happy with that. There was one specific thing which worried me, in that there was a suggestion that our response should include absolutely zero amounts for gifts. It's currently 25. The Committee on Public Standards suggested 50, and we're suggesting 0. Which seems to me to be moving in the opposite direction. The reason I'm quite happy with 25, I've never even come close to it, but there are occasions when somebody's kind enough to buy a pint. A definition of 0 would actually preclude that or make it declarable, if you are going to be strictly accurate. Now, I know treating is well established in election law and is an accepted part of the process, and nobody counts these things. But fundamentally, in the course of a councillor's business and duties, yes, occasionally people do buy you a pint. And under that particular viewpoint, or a drink or whatever, you know, a sandwich, whatever, usually of a very small, minuscule matter. And I'm not happy that we would propose a 0 sum for that. That's about the only thing I have to say.
Emily, can I bring you in on that one, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy to amend that as the committee wishes, but just to give you the reasoning behind that suggested response, it was just to reflect the approach that we take with staff members, which is that gifts and hospitality of any value must be registered. So it was just reflecting the approach that we take with staff, but I'm more than happy to amend the response as the committee wishes.
Yeah.
Robert, you wish to come in on this?
Oh yeah, just to support Alistair in that. I think it is slightly different role we have, and one of the things I have 18 different parish councils, and often they invite me for a drink after the parish council meeting, and I see it as an important part of kind of maintaining relations with them. If they offer to buy me a drink, I'd rather accept their offer than have to buy them all around.
And in many cases, it would be insulting to refuse. We're politicians, and we are social animals, and part of our role is literally to socialise with our electorate and the public in general. many of whom have, as you say, it's not just parish councils. There are a lot of people we talk to, and we need that certain amount of moderate, sensible freedom.
Agree.
Okay, Robert, thank you. I take your point. I seem to remember that you and I have gone to a pub and I've bought
Yes.
both times. So
Yes, you did. Haven't seen the colour of my money yet. Have you?
yeah, no, I just.
Well, you wouldn't let me, Bryn. You wouldn't let me
No,
go.
I can see where you're coming from.
You did say, Chair, you've been very busy.
Yes, I have been very busy. Yes, yes. I tend, Emily, to agree. I could see the recommendation on the front was to go up to 50, which I thought was a bit high. I think nil, it just puts you on tenterhooks all the time, doesn't it? If we socialise or you go to a meeting with parish council or things, it does put you in a very difficult position if you think, oh my God, I've got to write this down. So I am with Robert on that one, Emily, unless you can convince me I'm committing a crime otherwise.
No, Chair, I think that's perfectly reasonable, and I don't hear anybody suggesting a very high limit, so there won't be any new cars or anything like that. So I think that's perfectly reasonable.
No,
Barely get a bicycle repair.
Thank you. John Whitehead, I've just spotted you still in the meeting with a raised hand. Would you like to comment on anything that you've heard? Please?
Well, it was just particularly about Emily's response to question 15, because as I read that, if I go visit a resident and they say to me, would you like a cup of tea and a biscuit? I'd be having to say, oh, I have to declare the cup of tea and ask them how much a hobnob cost.
Quite right. I think that's my point exactly, and Robert's as well.
But that's in somebody's home, never mind in a pub or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, John. We can't all be as abstemious as you obviously are.
Any other general comments, councillors, before I have one final sort of whip around? You're looking to speak, John Matheson?
Yeah, just to say that the taking the point about what it is we're discussing and so on in Appendix C there. Now I found it again. I think Alistair's probably making some very valid points. And I see it's entirely open to him or him and colleagues to submit their own views as well on this.
Yes, it is.
So that option is there and probably worth exploring outside the meeting.
One might want to, but frankly, I think for a council as a whole, we should be providing a coordinated response that has been looked at, and obviously that's why the whole council will vote upon it. Because if we all do different responses to all of the 16 questions, it's going to make it very difficult to make a decision. I believe Emily's done an excellent job on this. I'd like to support the motion as it's presented to us, and propose so.
Yeah,
okay, Alistair, I'm taking that as a proposer. Anyone wishes to second?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Dave from Mid Suffolk. Before we leave, any final comments on the complete paper, please?
Yes, Chair. So,
Robert Lindsay.
Yeah.
Yes, far away.
So just to clarify, really, because my proposal was that with the item on council in disrepute, I think Emily's put we're sort of only mildly in favour. My proposal was to say we're not at all in favour of it, to alter that to not at all. But do I have support for that? Or?
Yeah, my apologies, Robert. I did mark my agenda to come back to that. You're saying this is just all part of the political kickabout, aren't you?
Yeah.
And what is your view on that, Emily?
Again, Chair, happy to adapt the consultation response to reflect the will of the committee. I think from what Councillor Lindsay is saying, that you'd like to amend question 8 to be not at all rather than to a small extent.
Yes.
Yeah, I think to be frank, Emily, we all say things we might slightly regret, and as long as it's polite, and if it's not, the apology is given. I think we just, I think it's down to the individual to have common sense on all these matters. So I would I would be in favour with Robert on that one, I would think.
Okay, well, if I'm proposing, I'm happy to accept that should be changed as Robert proposes, and we're taking out the recommendation of all gifts. Are we retaining, and I would be proposing that we retain the figure of £25.
Yes, that has already been agreed, Alistair.
Rather than going up to 50. Yeah, I'm just wanting to clarify what is being proposed and therefore obviously seconded. So those 2 points would be the only alterations we would be making to the council's response. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Your proposal. I've momentarily forgot who seconded.
It was myself, Chair.
Dave. Yes, sorry, Dave. Yeah.
Still second. Thank you.
Yes, but I think we've made a couple of sensible adjustments, so I'm well in favour of that. Okay, Mandy, if you'd just like to call the roll call, please. And it's a joint one this time, right across the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, members, if you could reply with for, against, or abstain. Councillor Haddingham.
For.
Councillor Hurren.
Yes, for.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor McCraw.
For.
Councillor McLaren.
For.
Councillor Matheson.
For.
Councillor Muller.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, Mandy. I think we've dealt with that one just perfectly correctly. Now we're on the last item. I'm trying to give everything a good depth without racing through things too much. But item 10, moving to page 107, the forward plan. Now, Jan isn't here. Emily, I think you're going to present this one. Is that correct?
Muted.
Okay, I think I might be there again now.
Yeah, you're fine. You're very easy to lip read, Emily. So we know what you're saying anyway. But please fire away.
I think my machine's on a go slow this afternoon, and it may very well be the heat. It's certainly very warm in my dining table today. Yes, Chair, I'll present the report in Jan's absence, although Mandy may wish to also chip in. Really, Chair, it's just for the committee to note the items on the forthcoming work plan. And I would just point out at this point, Chair, that the meeting in September contains 2 standing items. For constitutional updates, there are none proposed at the moment. And in terms of the monitoring officer report, that's simply a statistical report on the number of complaints that have been received. So it's not time bound. Therefore, there may be a possibility that the committee may not go ahead in September if no other items of business come forward.
So it's a distinct possibility if nothing needs doing urgently, this meeting could be abandoned, is it?
I think cancelled with the agreement of the chairs is the term, Councillor.
Yes, okay, yeah, no, not abandoned. I didn't quite mean that. Looking at the date, everybody, I see the 28th of September is my annual day off, and I only get one, so it would be down to Dave to chair anyway, but we'll deal with that as it comes. If it needs to go ahead, Dave would chair. If not, we'll agree to defer. Is there any comments from any councillor on the forward work plan, please? John Matheson.
Yeah, I've got a point of what's on there, but also a question for some clarification, which Emily might be able to provide or not. And I felt that we ought to be hoping to see our final accounts for 2019-20 sooner than November. Now we know, I mean, the government set out its stall a while back, a year and a half, something back now, that they wanted to accelerate the production of the accounts. And as we've heard at the last meeting again, EY got into a very, very different place along with a lot of its colleagues and competitors, but we really November, 31st of March accounts, November is really we ought to be aiming for September or October with that. And I don't know whether Melissa or Sue are able to shed any light on that. And I've got a second question after that.
Okay, thank you, John. I'll call in Melissa. I think I know exactly what you're going to say, Melissa, but please fire away to answer John's question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Matheson, for your question. Yeah, the government did extend the deadline for councils to publish their draft accounts on the website to the 31st of August. And unfortunately, with the COVID response, my team have been flat out trying to respond to things, as well as keeping business as usual running as well, which was really vitally important to the two councils. So unfortunately, we are going to be in that position where we probably are going to publish close to the 31st of August. What that does then do is impact on the time frame that Ernst & Young were going to be coming in to audit our accounts. We did have a window of the 13th of July. They've now redeployed their resources elsewhere. So they now won't be starting our audit until October. There are some things they will be doing off-site, so there's certain things they can be looking at in the interim, but the main piece of work that they'll be doing will be starting in October. So unfortunately, November is the earliest we could have that audit opinion and the accounts.
Yeah, what about bringing the draft accounts to the September meeting? Presumably, if you're going for the 31st of August to give it to the auditors, so we could have a look at the in draft, see how things are looking, because I mean this is going to be quite critical stuff. Is it going to Cabinet or anywhere else?
No, it doesn't go to Cabinet. It just comes to Joint Audit and Standards Committee. I mean, it's certainly something I can discuss with Catherine.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Can I just raise a point there? That we have, after all, just gone through 2 meetings in about a fortnight. We've looked at those accounts. This will only be 3 months after the last time we examined any accounts, and I'm not sure I see a great deal of point in looking at draft audits. A draft audit statement is something of a contradiction in terms, in my opinion. So I'm not sure there's a great deal of value in that. Plus, say this committee would normally meet once a quarter. We've just obviously had a bit of catch up because of COVID-19. If September doesn't happen, we've still got, looking at the schedule, and I'm just thinking of councillors' time, because I'm aware that these have not been short meetings. November seems perfectly reasonable, given the context of this committee and how it has operated in the past. I just don't want to see us overloading ourselves with repetition of the same ground, and I think there's a danger of that. We're also meeting in January with a very full agenda, and I would suggest, and then again in March. So in fact, if anything, we're accelerating our work programme above and beyond what would normally be the case.
Yeah, I think I have to say, committee, I do agree with that. With due respect to you, John Matheson, the accounts are the accounts. I don't see any point in looking at draft accounts that might be altered later, so I would not support seeing them for the sake of it. Dave, you were waving a while
yes,
back.
I must admit, I totally agree with Alistair and also yourself, Bryn. I would not recommend looking at the draft accounts. As I say, they could well be amended, and I would literally like to see the final accounts once they are actually ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, can you just sort of reassure us? Well, also for the reason, it's just staff time, I presume, isn't it? And you're obviously under a fair bit of pressure.
Absolutely, yeah. If I could just mention the other thing we did want to work on as well before coming back in November, and I think it was raised at the last meeting, was an explanation around how SIFCO and the holding accounts feed into our accounts. Yes. So obviously we'd like to do a little bit of work to have that ready as well. So I think if we come back in September, I think we might not have enough time to pull all that together, and we want to give you a real thorough understanding of how those numbers feature in our accounts as well. So it would be helpful to have a little bit more time to pull that together, so it's understandable and gives you what you need.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Just to reassure everybody, Dave and myself as co-chairs, we are in constant touch with the lead officers, and if they're struggling, they do tell us. So there is quite a bit going on, so please be reassured that everybody is doing the best, and I don't want to cane the staff who are obviously putting in extra hours, and some have been on other duties anyway due to the position we're in at the moment. Dave Muller, would you just like to clarify that, please?
Yes, I totally agree with that, Bryn, and I'd like to thank the officers for all their hard work in these difficult times. So thank you.
Yes, looking at the agendas ahead to come, I think we're going to have a lot to come on, and it is going to be accelerating. So, let's just all breathe slowly for a while, take a bit of time and do it properly. John Matheson.
Yeah, Melissa certainly began to address the exact question that I wanted to ask, really, which was in terms of the accounts and audits of our subsidiary companies. So are they going to feature on the forward plan, or they're going to be tucked up together with? How are you thinking of doing that, Melissa?
Yes, Melissa, this is not going to be laid to rest, so maybe you can assure us on this one, please. No, I think there should be an open debate on this, and I take it that you would welcome that as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, anything we can help to, clarify the picture and make things clear on how, the audit opinions on the CIFCO and the company's accounts differ to, with the work that Ernst & Young do. We certainly would like to have that dialogue to make it, as clear as possible. Absolutely. Because I think when you look at the accounts, it's not that easy to see the numbers in there. So anything we can do, obviously we've got a statutory duty to present them in the way they do, but we can do extra to give you that clearer picture as well. So we'd certainly like to have that conversation about what you would need to see that picture.
Thank you, Melissa, and to everybody. It's important that we move along steadily, especially with what we're all facing, and as long as it's in a straight line without too many deviations, we should all stick together on this one. Dave, you still got your hand up?
No, sorry, apologies.
That's all right. Don't worry. Yeah. We're all a bit trigger happy. So we'll see each other. Looks like 30th of November and possibly not the 28th of September. Anything else that anybody wishes to raise to this point regarding a future meeting? No. Okay. Well, I thank you all very, very much for your attendance, and I will see you at the next meeting. Whenever that might be. If we miss one, it will be Dave's chair to chair that one, I would think. We do talk to each other, and if one is away, we'll always substitute for the other and keep the score roughly even. And thank you to all the officers for all your time. And I'm sorry the circumstances of the heat at the moment, but it will cool down tomorrow, I hear. The meeting is now officially closed. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Bryn.